I'm Dr. Sandeep Budhiraja, and I'm the Director of Internal Medicine at Max Healthcare. I've been working with Max for last 10 years. In my profession, basically, it's a clinical work, administrative work, and academics. Malnutrition is a state which is caused by undernutrition. Now, undernutrition could be in terms of reduced calorie intake or imbalanced diet. Now, imbalance could be in deficiencies in protein or excess of carbohydrates or excess of fats. So, imbalance in the dietary constituents and overall reduced calories leads to malnutrition. Now, there's a big myth revolving around malnutrition. We tend to normally believe that malnutrition is equivalent to poverty, and we would see malnutrition and malnutrition related problems only in poor children, poor households. But that's not really true. As I just told you, that it's actually the imbalance which is a bigger problem. And this imbalance in the food or food constituents really stems from the food fads or our dietary indiscretions or our preferences for certain types of food. And these preferences are much stronger in children. And that's how these preferences then stay all your life and lead continuously to nutrition, especially so of protein and calories. So in a child who's basically hooked onto a junk food, he would definitely get malnourished because of deficiencies of certain important vitamins, proteins, and other components in the diet. So we have to see the problem of malnutrition much more holistically. And in India, actually, it's very interesting that we have a dual problem. At one end of the spectrum, we basically are catering to problems related to malnutrition, both in poor and affluent people. And at the same time, we have a growing problem almost to reaching an epidemic proportions of obesity. And obesity also stems basically from the same factors as malnutrition does. That's basically the imbalance in your dietary constituents. So children who are hooked onto junk food will invariably tend to take more of carbohydrates and fats. And this leads to growing problem of obesity, which is compounded naturally by lack of exercise, being hooked onto TV indoors, and going less for outdoor sports. So it's actually a continuum spectrum of a problem, which at one end is malnutrition and the other end is obesity, and can be seen in any spectrum of society. See, health and good habits are best taught in young age, because then they stick with you for your life. We say the basis of good health must stem from there. And when we say good health in a child, of course, nutrition and diet is one of the most important components to it. But we must not forget other equally important things which lead to a state of good health. And remember, when you say good health, it doesn't really mean only a physical health. It means your physical, spiritual, psychological, and mental well-being. And this is sort of definition of a health given by WHO. So when we talk about what constitutes health of a child, it is all these spectrum which I've just spoken about. And what leads to a good health in a child and later on makes a good healthy adult, of course, nutrition and diet is one, exercise, hygienic habits, and proper sleep. Now, I would say that these four components are very, very important and rather actually equally important. We have had a discussion about diet, what healthy diet is, what a balanced diet is. I would at the same time like to emphasize about exercise part. Now, exercise is not a prescription which is given by a doctor. It is something which a person inculcates into his routine living or routine healthy living. So although exercise has to be initially taught, but then later on it becomes a part and parcel of a person's life. Now, we must ask, what is the appropriate level of exercise for a person? Well, the recommendations keep changing from time to time. What WHO initially, or let's say the world physicians started initially saying that half an hour of daily exercise is good enough, we have reached that to now extended that to 1 hour a day. Now, what is the right level of exercise for a child? What are the do's and don'ts? The golden rule for any exercise remains that you must have a period of warming up phase and a cool down phase. One must not start exercising all of a sudden. It has to be a gradual thing. It has to have a balance. Just like in a normal balanced diet, you have to have balance of constituents. In an exercise, you have to have a balance of a muscle building exercise and an aerobic exercise. Now, normally we say that a child especially should not start off by a muscle building exercise unless until he has reached a particular developmental level, which we call as a Tanner stage 5, or which corresponds to an age of 15 years. After that, a child can, or rather an adolescent can think of working up vigorously to build up his muscles. But prior to that, aerobic exercises or the cardiac exercises are one which is very important. And I would say that almost an hour of exercise every day is required. And this should include at least first 15 minutes as a warm-up phase. Now, this can be done as a solo activity, or this can be done as a group activity, especially in schools where it is mandatory to have games period. I think that's the whole concept behind it, that a child is asked to spend 30 to 45 minutes in a vigorous physical exercise, which may be in form of sports. And normally, because of these are group activities, so they inculcate a spirit of sort of a competitiveness in a child, which is also very important, and a good healthy competition is good for your person's mental development. So this done properly in a child's environment in school goes a long way for mental and physical development. At the same time, I did talk about a proper hygiene. Now, in this, the concept of hand hygiene is what is most paramount. We as adults know that most of the diseases, especially the infectious diseases, are transmitted by poor hygiene. Now, that may be your personal poor hygiene practices of not washing hands properly, or hygiene may be concerned regarding poor unhygienic food. So these are some things which are taught at a developmental stage during childhood, and again go a long way during your adult life to prevent diseases. Now, we always emphasize that a proper hand washing technique must be taught to children. Washing your hands with soap and water profusely, adequately, and spend time doing that before and after you have your meals, after you go to the washroom. Make sure that you do not touch the washroom handles when exiting. So simple hygiene techniques and methods which may be so basic, but still largely lacking in children and later on in adults if these are not taught properly. Another important aspect of a good health, especially a good child's health, is adequate sleep. Now, we all emphasize as parents and doctors and adults talking about the studying, about activities, physical activities and diet, but we hardly ever emphasize upon the importance of sleep. And this is something which we are increasingly seeing nowadays as doctors, a problem of sleep deprivation. Children spend much more time, longer hours in front of their laptops, computers, playing games and watching televisions late night. And still at the same time, they have to catch their school buses early in the morning. So what is being compromised is their sleeping hours. Now, this is something which ultimately has an impact not only on the physical and mental growth, but also on their concentration ability and overall scholastic performance in the school. We normally say that 8 to 10 hours of sleep is absolutely must in children, especially growing children. And actually in adolescents, the requirement may be more, between 10 to 13 hours. So the more the sleep, the sounder the sleep is, the better their overall performance, physical and mental aptitudes will be. I would like to make a passing mention of what I mean as a physician by a balanced food. A food which contains proper ratios of fats, carbohydrates, proteins, minerals, vitamins, and fiber. And these need not be in the same order as I told you. Of course, the fat content has to be something which is minimal. Of course, it leads to other problems like obesity, but doesn't take care of that. Now, if we calculate the protein intake in an Indian diet, it's grossly lacking. We normally would recommend 1 gram of protein per kilogram body weight, especially in growing children, maybe even more. And if we calculate the average Indian diet, this is hugely deficient. So we have to identify the diets, especially if a person is pure vegetarian, as to how much additional supplementation of proteins and minerals like calcium and vitamins needs to be done at this age. And I'm sure periodic health checkups which are done at school do emphasize on this aspect because any deficiency at this stage of development reflects in poor bone growth, poor skeletal growth, poor mental growth, and of course, susceptibility to a lot of infections and what we call as poor overall immunity, and a person falling prey to repeated infections. All these can be largely taken care of and prevented if one is careful at this growing age of the basic things we have just spoken about. If I have to say what are the practical tips I can give for the parents so that they bring up a healthy child and later on a healthy adult and a responsible citizen would be as following. Number one, ensure a good, healthy, balanced diet for your child. so as to prevent problems of either malnutrition or obesity. Number 2, ensure a proper exercise for your child. And exercise means a proper exercise which is a blend of aerobic, mental, yoga, relaxation, and physical activity. So encourage outdoor activities for your child. Do not use car to go to your nearby places, and you yourself be a partner with your children and accompany them and walk and exercise more. Third tip is you have to yourself set a role model and set an example in front of your children by having good hygienic practices. Hand washing, personal cleanliness, and safe food is very, very important. And most importantly, I would say, is ensure that a child has good routine. And routine means defined number of hours of studying, of playing, of exercising, and of sleeping. As parents, we tend to forget this very often, but make sure that your children get a good night's sleep so that they wake up fresh and they have a good, nice day.